All right, welcome back to Automate Live. Here at day 3 at Automate in Detroit, Michigan. My name is Chris Luecke, host of the Manufacturing Happy Hour podcast, and I am joined by an old friend from industry, Robert Ponsonby, Arduino's partner sales manager for the Americas. Welcome.
Good to be here, Chris.
Good to have you back on. You are familiar with Manufacturing Happy Hour from back in the old days, so we'll start off with a bit of a question over a beer. Today we're talking about redefining interoperability and how you're making industrial plug and play possible. But let's define interoperability first and why it's so important for this industry, as if we're having a drink at, say, the Automate Happy Hour.
That's a great place to start. So if we think about manufacturing in its current stage with PLCs, all these different control systems, that industry is about 50 years old at this point, right? So you have such a diverse maturity of products that are in the market, that are in service, and that manufacturers have to maintain. And so a trick is, whenever you're looking at the new technology, how do you also bring along what you've had before and capture that data? And so whether it's legacy systems, legacy control networks, interoperating with new control platforms, that's a really key area that we can play a huge role in, whether that's on the protocol side, on the mapping of I/O in parallel processes. For example, we've got a great use case with Steelcase, right?
Yeah.
One of the largest manufacturers of furniture, and they have a very old Allen Bradley system on their D-stacker. They don't want to take it out. Right, it's working okay, but they wanted to gather data on how it's performing, what does a downtime scenario indicate, and how are their operators engaging with the machine. So they ran one of our devices in parallel to the control system. They're able to gather that local I/O, pull it natively into their cloud. In this case, they were using Azure, but we can use any hyperscaler or our own cloud infrastructure.
Yep.
And then they start categorizing operational data. And that allows them to build a use case, that allows them to build a financial model on if and when they want to invest in a new machine or a new control platform, they have that specific data to show how it can benefit them.
Yeah, great example, because if I were to summarize one of the things I heard, there's a lot of data you can collect throughout manufacturing facilities, and some of the older equipment just doesn't make it as easy to get that data off.
Exactly.
Of there. So you've provided a platform that allows to collect that data, particularly if that manufacturer is like, hey, we still like using this piece of equipment. Like, we don't want to get rid of it, but we need to pull more information off of it so that way we can interact with the rest of our operation.
Exactly. And it even happens on the new Greenfield side as well. We have a manufacturer out of Germany. They're building a Greenfield facility. They went out to their OEM community and they said, we need your expertise on the machines you bring in. So you use the control platform that you want. You are the experts for your specific application. And then we're just going to layer in the Opta as a supervisory system to collect that data and make it easy for our IoT group to ingest data, pull it in the packetization that we want, and then get actionable insights on it.
Well, let's keep going a step further, because what is, making interoperability more possible is your open source approach.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. You gave a great example starting off with Steelcase. What are the advantages for industrial interoperability by using an open source approach? Name your top 1, 2, or 3 maybe.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, you're not in a locked-in ecosystem, right? By working with Arduino, and we have a long history of democratizing electronics, of maintaining an open source posture. And so we work with every major manufacturer to ensure there is compatibility and ease of use. So that taps into the community as well. So first of all, there's not that lock-in. Second of all, because it's open source, the community can contribute. So we're taking that same mantra that we have from our legacy in education and hobbyist electronics to tap into that community for innovative solutions. And so we now have this whole section of our website dedicated to how professionals are using our products to solve their real-world problems in manufacturing. And that builds on the community aspect to where folks can work together to tackle these issues.
I actually think that's a really underrated benefit, because we've seen it here this week. We're here obviously at the trade show during the day, but there are a lot of networking events that take place after Automate. We were both at the same one last night, and that community element cannot be understated. I mean, that's one of the most important things here. The fact that you're not locked in, that has an obvious technical advantage. But the fact that now you can get more people working together, sharing best practices, that takes it to a new level. And when people have their buddies, the folks they trust, all doing the same thing, You can't discount that factor in terms of why someone would go a different approach with their controls.
Yeah. And I'd also say the third aspect, right, to make it a nice story here is we are trying to bring in the next generation to manufacturing.
Yeah.
Right. So where we're coming from compared to other folks in this industry is that we have a long legacy in education. And as you know, most engineering curriculums, they're focused on computer science, C++ programming, microelectronics. And then when you get into manufacturing, it's a whole new world, right? What's ladder logic? Right. Yeah. Most graduates coming out have no idea what that is unless they went through a dedicated program for that. The beauty of the platform that we're offering is it's a way to combine those skill sets so that you can get someone that maybe comes from more of a computer science background. They can move into automation and industry and still bring those skills with them.
Yeah.
And we've launched curriculums like our ACE 100 and our ACE 120 course. It's free, open access to the public, and it teaches students or industry professionals that are looking to reskill how to do that in a controlled manner and through a certified process.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually talking about this in another conversation where I first started hearing the need for open source when I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area and was working in the automation industry out there. Because a lot of folks that had come out of school were not, you're not learning ladder logic in school. You're learning C# and different programming languages. But as we get in maybe to a little more of the nuts and bolts of this, let's talk about some of the other things that an open source approach enables. OPC UA integration being one of them. Cloud connectivity being another. I've rattled off a couple that I know are at the top of the list, but what are some of the key ones you'd like to highlight as well?
Well, with OPC UA, that allows us to really extend the diagnostics and behavioral data for a machine, right? So if you have a standard control system, you can now bring in our devices, which, by the way, like starting at sub $200, it's a great accessible path for someone looking to expand their information data collecting within a facility. So OPC UA is a great example of how we're aligned with new industry standards. We're also members of SESME, right? So we're working with the U.S. government, with industry on how do we enable the next generation of smart manufacturing so that there is true interoperability and scalability within this technology subset.
Yep. No, I would agree with both of those. Now, let's go a little further as well. Let's talk about how a system like this removes the complexity as well, and maybe talk about the old way versus the new way that you've enabled as well.
Yeah.
We're talking about removing complexity from legacy systems, edge devices, cloud platforms, etc. Take us under the hood there a bit as well.
So actually, just last month, we launched a really neat feature on our cloud platform. So for those who are unaware, Arduino Cloud allows you to program your devices, manage your devices, and do IoT role-based access for reporting, right? So it's a really nice built-out system. What we just launched last month is a new generative AI interface within the platform to allow for code development. And that is all trained on our validated libraries, our application notes that are available and vetted by our team. So, you query, hey, we're going to be having these sort of inputs with these valuations, and then we want to be able to control a pump, a valve, whatever you might say. It'll generate 80% of your code base for you, and then you just customize it to what your specific needs are. And that's a step further than where we've been historically, where we've had very well-documented application notes so that anyone who wants to start a project doesn't start from scratch. They can literally copy and paste code from our examples into their project. And so the install base is there, the history is there, and then you have the community as well if you run into any issues, right? So the simplification, that's our mission, is to make it easy for any of this technology to go to scale.
Yeah, and the industry, I believe, has always looked at Arduino as a platform that removes the complexity, makes it easy. One thing I'd be interested to get your take on, particularly as the partner sales manager, is what has the industry's appetite been for Arduino as you're making more of a name for yourself in the industrial space? Because, you and I can be candid on this. In the past, Arduino, I believe, was kind of defaulted as like, oh yeah, that's the controller that the hacker that's just getting into, very light industrial controls might use. But I'd love to hear how that reality is starting to shift.
Yeah, so I'd say it's in two different areas, but overall you're right? There's excitement, but skepticism, maybe a little hesitation to see, is this truly industrial grade? On the embedded side, right, we have a long history of being implemented in R&D groups, but maybe not on final products, right? So now we're starting to see that transition go to where they're using us in final products. But specific for the audience here at Automate this week, we're starting to see some pretty large adoptions, and not just, hey, we just installed it, we think it's going to be fine. We've been installed in facilities around the globe now for a number of years without any issues, without any hiccups. We've had conversions from legacy platforms, legacy automation platforms, to our Opta-based system or our Portenta machine control, and the feedback from users has been phenomenal. We've got an active project right now with one of our integrators, Control SI, out of Peru. They're working on a complete turnkey migration for a large textile manufacturer that covers all of Peru, and they're migrating directly to our ecosystem, right? Everything is going to be our Portenta machine control, our Arduino Pro WizGate routers that has a cellular backhaul, pulling it into the cloud, providing those insights to them. So it's enabling this manufacturer to modernize at scale at a price point that previously was unattainable. So the ROI is completely shifted for these users.
What advice would you give to other manufacturers, automation leaders out there that, because, I've seen you throughout your career and you've done some fascinating things within the OEM space, now with Arduino. What advice would you give to folks about redefining a name for yourself, right? Or breaking in to that market, that vertical maybe that you haven't been into? You've been successful at doing this, and I also feel like building systems that allow you to accomplish that. So I'd love to hear some, let's say, leadership advice in that capacity.
So I try to approach my life as a continuous learning experience.
Yeah.
Right? So what I'd say is things are always evolving, things are always changing, and if you're afraid of risk, I think that's okay, but you can't stop experimentation.
Yeah.
You have to keep learning, keep trying different things, and it can be in a controlled experiment, right? Obviously, you want to limit risk in certain areas, but just because something's been done one way forever does not mean that it should continue to operate in that way. So don't be afraid of pulling in new technologies, of trying different partnerships, and honestly, networking and understanding how things are doing, where innovations are coming from, right? It's not just us, but we have a whole network of organizations. We coordinate with all the major players as well in their R&D groups to understand what's going on. And you just have to continually look for new opportunities, and it all has to be around real world problems that we're trying to solve, right? You can build the coolest mousetrap, but if nobody actually is needing that to solve a problem or an issue, it's just going to sit on the shelf. Yeah. So always being centered and focused on what is the issue we're solving and what players and parts can be put together to really make a world-class solution.
Well, I appreciate you getting into that side of the conversation. To wrap things up, we were talking about advantages for industrial operability from like the open source approach, talked about community, talked about getting the next generation into manufacturing. The last question I would ask is, how is interoperability in this open source approach, allowing for innovation, empowering the teams and people behind the folks that are the users of the technology?
Well, I'd say probably the biggest benefit is rapid deployment. So on projects that we've been involved in, where they're able to take advantage of the open source nature with the existing application notes, the code bases, we've seen on average for rollouts on projects, a 70% reduction in timeline. I mean, when you kick off a project, if it's going to be a 6-month project, all of a sudden you guys are done in a month and a half. That's a substantial savings internally. And if you're an OEM, right, that's a quicker time to revenue. That's a quicker time to realization of that financial investment in that project.
Yeah. Great example. What's the best way to connect with Arduino?
So there's a contact us form on our website. If you're here at the show this week, we are in booth 6632. We'd love for you to stop by. We've got a number of great demonstrations, both internally made and from our partner community that are here from around the globe. So we'd love to be able to talk to you. If not, look me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with anyone who is interested in learning more.
Robert, thank you for jumping on. It's been great chatting with you. Great catching up. For everyone out there, we'll be back with more Automate Live very soon.